Bought an expensive Audi despite my girlfriend's protests. She demanded an apology after I refused to take her feelings seriously. I'm 27, and my girlfriend Georgia is 25. She works long shifts as a pharmacy associate. We've been together for 2.5 years now, and I honestly see a real future with her. My life's been a grind, working in healthcare, saving every possible dollar through my 20s. I didn't have some wild college era or anything. Instead, I just doubled down, stacking money and planning ahead. But lately, I've been feeling fed up with my Hyundai, cramped, plain, just not something I looked forward to being in every day. I finally made up my mind that I deserved something nice for once, something actually comfortable. So when Georgia and I were talking, I told her about my plans to get a new car. I could tell as soon as I brought up the topic that she wasn't into it. She pressed for details, and as soon as she heard what I had in mind, she was vehemently against it. That honestly surprised me. But I told her straight up that I still wanted to go through with it. That set off a string of arguments between us, our first real fights, honestly. Every time I'd bring up the car, she'd either shut down the conversation or hit me with reasons that just didn't add up for me. It's too expensive, she'd say over and over. My response? Well, I can afford it. I've got a ton saved up for things like this. But we kept clashing. I started getting really frustrated, so I vented to one of my friends about the situation. He was blunt: she's joining onto your life, man. She can hop on or not, but you don't need her permission. That stuck with me. So I went back to Georgia and told her straight up, I'm getting the car. She just said, do what you want. So I did. I pulled the trigger and bought a 2022 Audi A6 45 Premium Plus just a couple days ago. The test drive was incredible, smooth as silk. Black leather seats, gorgeous white paint, practically new with low miles, a spotless Carfax, and those 20-inch V rims gleaming in the sunlight. I was practically giddy. The dealership gave it to me for $39,000 out the door. I put $15,000 down, traded in the Hyundai, and financed the rest through my credit union. By the time I drove home, I couldn't stop smiling. I called Georgia that night and invited her to my apartment. Figured I'd make an evening of it. Cooked her salmon and mashed potatoes, uncorked a bottle of wine, even picked up a store-bought cheesecake for dessert. Once dinner wrapped up, I led her outside to see the car, hoping maybe once she actually saw it, felt the seats, saw how big of an upgrade it was, she'd get it. Who wouldn't want to be a passenger princess in this kind of German luxury? But she wasn't impressed. The moment she saw it, her face dropped. You actually did it? She asked, sounding incredulous. I told her yeah, just like I'd said I would. We started bickering, and she pressed me for numbers. When I told her what it cost, she blurted out, that's more than I make in a year. I tried to explain again that I was in a financial position to afford it, but the argument spiraled. Finally, hitting my limit, I told her flat out, if you can't be happy for me, you might as well go home. She started tearing up at that point, apologizing, and I felt bad for snapping. So I apologized too, and we just spent the rest of the night in silence. Today, she called me up and said she wanted an apology for not taking her feelings seriously about the car. I refused. I told her, I'm happy with my decision, and her reaction isn't my responsibility to fix. She fired back that it was a cruel thing to say, but to me, the real issue was her trying to control what I do with my hard-earned money as a grown man. That's where we are now. Update 1. My girlfriend wasn't expecting a ring. I knew she didn't want one while she was deciding whether to go to grad school or pharmacy school. The thing is, I can afford the car. I work as a nurse, pulling in over $70,000 a year, and I've managed to save up a lot. After 4 years as a nurse, I had lived with my parents for 3 of those, spending almost nothing the entire time. So when I bought a used Audi A6, the biggest purchase I'd ever made, I decided to finance half of it, just in case I decided to go for a mortgage later. Things had gotten tense between us since that last exchange. Wanting to smooth things over, I took her out for ice cream and then surprised her with an appointment to get her nails done. She laughed and asked if I was trying to bribe her out of being mad, but I told her I was just trying to be kind, even though I'd planned these weekend activities ahead of time and, honestly, I was still pretty mad at her. Usually, after a date, we'd end the night at my place, but I just didn't have the bandwidth this time. I dropped her off at her parents' house, told her I needed some space, and asked if she could come by my place the next day so we could put this issue to rest. She agreed. The next day, I ran my errands and got ready for our talk. Around 6, after her shift, she came by. I sat her down at the table with some pizza and asked her if we could just keep things civil, try not to get too emotional. I wanted to know why she thought the car was too expensive. She said it just was, it was excessive and wasteful. I surprised her by agreeing. I told her how I'd saved for years, spent almost nothing on myself, and just once wanted something excessive for me. She wanted to know if this was a one-off. I told her probably. I planned to treat the car well. Then I asked her why her reaction had been so strong to the car. That's when she kind of shut down. I prodded a bit more, and she finally said she had decided to go to pharmacy school. She was going to tell me soon. While she's making this big adult decision, here I was, in her eyes, blowing a bunch of money on a luxury car. I congratulated her on making her decision about her career, Even if I didn't fully agree with her characterization, I could see how she'd view it that way. I asked which schools she was applying to. She listed a few public universities in the state, and then said she'd have no option but to take out loans. She was also hoping I'd be willing to help out or chip in. I told her I loved her, but she had taken her anxieties about paying for her pharmacy degree out on me, instead of being happy for me and my new car. She apologized, admitting she hadn't realized how much it meant to me. She started crying, and I held her for a while. We talked for a long time after that. Honestly, though, things still feel so uncertain. I feel like I saw a really bad side of her, and now, before taking really big steps together, I'm concerned. Her lack of communication, and this sense of control she felt over my purchases, is troubling, and I just don't think it would be a good idea for me to marry her. And to be clear, there's no way I'd support someone through a pharmacy degree without some sort of legal reassurance. It was a bittersweet end to the night. We said I love you, but I dropped her back at her parents' house. Right now, I'm 90% leaning toward ending this relationship. I just don't see us heading in the same direction anymore. Update 2. Georgia texted me Sunday morning and asked if I could come to dinner at her parents' place, to talk like adults, her words. I'd slept at my place after a rough night shift and still had that gritty, underslept feeling behind my eyes, but I showered, put on a clean polo, and drove the Audi over. The neighborhood is one of those old, quiet subdivisions with curbs swallowed by grass and kids' bikes tipped over in driveways. Her dad was at the grill in a Walgreens polo, sleeves pushed up, flipping burgers with that tight jaw he gets when he's trying to act casual. Inside, her mom had set the table with those big glass plates they only bring out when grandparents come over. I could hear the TV chattering from the living room on some pharmacy commercial. Every other ad was suddenly pharmacy school or consolidation loans, and it was like the universe was doing too much. We ate like normal people for the first 15 minutes. Talked about the heat, her mom asked about my unit, her dad complimented the smooth ride of my car with this sideways smile that felt like a test. Then Georgia cleared her throat and slid a file folder across the table like she was presenting at work. It was tuition breakdowns from 3 schools, living expenses, a printed spreadsheet. I skimmed the numbers, 4 years, rotations, the fees you don't think about unless you've done it already, lab coats, immunization titers, test prep. She'd highlighted totals in yellow. She'd even listed a bare bones monthly budget for each campus town. For a second, I was honestly proud of how organized she'd gotten. I opened my mouth to say that, and before I could, she said, "I need you to co-sign." The word landed like a brick. I kept my face neutral on purpose. For what exactly? Private loans. Federal won't cover everything. I can do the FAFSA, but for the gap, I'm going to need a co-signer or I get hit with insane rates. She said it calmly, like it was a line item, no big deal. Her dad set his fork down and looked at me, then at Georgia. He didn't jump in, which was somehow worse. I leaned back in my chair. "Georgia, we're not married. I'm not comfortable co-signing student debt. I can help you budget, I can help you look at options, but signing my name to tens of thousands, I can't do that." She blinked like she'd been expecting that but hoping I'd surprise her. "It's not tens of thousands, well, it is, but spread out. I'll be working too." Her mom cut in then, gently, "It's an investment in their future." I put my palms on the table. I'm not trying to be difficult. If we were engaged, if there was a plan that protected both of us, prenup, something, we could talk. But right now, it's a huge risk for me. If anything goes wrong, it lands on my credit, my paycheck. Her dad finally spoke. "A man who buys a luxury car and says he can't help his woman with school? Are you hearing yourself?" "This isn't about can't," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's about won't. It's about boundaries." Georgia's eyes flicked between us. "I wasn't trying to ambush you, I swear," she said to me. I had to know. I got into State's program." She paused, waiting for a reaction. "The campus 2 hours away. I want to accept. I want to move before August." That was new. "You got in?" I said, because that part actually deserved congratulations. "That's huge." "I meant it." She nodded, lips trembling a little, "But I can't do it alone. I want you to come. We can get a place together. Your schedule is flexible, you could get a job at the hospital there. We can start our life." I swallowed. "My lease runs through next spring. My manager had just offered me a preceptor track. My parents live 30 minutes from me, her family is here. I also had a $24,000 auto loan now, which, let's be real, doesn't chain me anywhere, but it's not nothing. You're asking me to uproot my job and move for your program, and co-sign loans, and do it all now," I said. "We haven't even figured out last week yet." She looked at the folder like it might rearrange itself into something easier. "Last week was about the car," she said softly. "This is about us." Her dad pointed his chin at me. "What did you think being with my daughter would mean? You think you just drive around in that thing and dip in for dinners on Sundays? You're either building towards something or you're not." I took a breath. I thought about the pizza at my place, the two of us talking slowly, the way she'd told me she was hoping I'd help chip in. In her head, she'd already made the story, I buy a car, therefore he can pay. And on some level, she really believed that. Georgia, I said, turning to her. I love you. I want you to be a pharmacist if that's your path. I can help you pack, I can help you find cheap furniture, I can spot you for fees if you get caught off guard, small stuff. I cannot co-sign, and I'm not moving 2 hours away right now. I'm not ready for that. I'm not asking you to pick me over school. I'm telling you I won't be dragged into a life I didn't agree to overnight. The silence after that was thick. Her mom took the plates to the sink even though the food was still on them. Her dad shook his head like he'd seen it all before. Georgia wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. So that's it? She asked. You're just staying here? With your car? That stung more than it should have. It's not about the car, I said. It's about the way you decided a bunch of things for both of us and then got mad when I didn't fall in line. I didn't decide without you, she shot back. I was scared to tell you because of how you reacted. You made a big purchase and told me to like it or leave. I'm trying to include you. And yeah, maybe I hoped you'd step up. Her dad pushed back his chair and stood. Let's give you two some space, he said, and then they did the slow, awkward retreat to the living room that people do when they're trying to eavesdrop but also give privacy. We sat there at the table, both breathing like we'd run sprints. I reached for her hand. She let me hold it for a second, then pulled away. Tell me what you want, I said. I want you to choose me, she whispered. I want you to choose us. If you can't do that, if you can't even imagine it enough to take a leap, then I don't want to beg you. I refuse to be the only one betting on us. I stared at the condensation ring her water glass left on the wood. The stupidest little detail to fixate on in that moment. I heard her mom laugh at something the TV said and then immediately shush herself. I stood. I can't co-sign, I said. I'm not moving. I can't promise you a timeline where those turn into yes soon, and you shouldn't wait around on a guy who's telling you that. She nodded, once, hard. Okay, she said. Then this is where we stop. We walked out to the driveway together. The sun was low, everything gold. Her parents stayed inside. Georgia hugged me like she was hanging on and pushing me away at the same time. I really do love you, she said into my shoulder. I love you, too, I said, and that felt both completely true and like something we'd already packed in a box and labeled for storage. I got in the Audi. The leather was warm from the heat and the cabin smelled faintly like the cologne I'd sprayed that morning. When I started it, the dash lit up with a tire pressure warning. Of course. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the timing was ridiculous. I drove slow to the gas station, checked that rear passenger, screw right in the tread, like a little silver flag. I pulled the donut out, wrestled the jack into place and closed too nice for this, and while I was fighting with a lug nut some teenager walked by and said, "Sick car, bro." I thanked him with dirt on my hands. The discount tire place was open for another hour. I limped there on the spare, bought a new tire because the old one wasn't patchable, and watched my paycheck burn a little. The guy tried to upsell me on a road hazard warranty and for once I said yes. Back at my apartment, I put the extra toothbrush from my medicine cabinet in a plastic sandwich bag like an idiot because it felt, again, like a thing you're supposed to do in these moments. I pulled her hoodie from the chair and folded it. I took the spare key fob she'd never had but we joked about getting her and put it back in the drawer. I slept badly. In the morning, my phone had a text from her, "Can you drop off my hoodie at my mom's?" I said yes. I drove it over before my shift. Her mom opened the door and hugged me longer than felt normal. "Good luck," she said, and I couldn't tell if she meant with my life or my car or the day or all of it. At work, I charted, hung meds, coached a new grad through her first NG tube, laughed at a dad joke a patient told me. Between rounding, I caught myself looking at the photo of Georgia and me on my lock screen, us at the beach last summer, wind ruining her hair and her not caring. I changed it to a picture of a trail in the state park near my place. It felt weirdly disloyal and also necessary. On my way home after shift, I took the long way. The Audi glided over the overpass, the city lights looked like somebody had shaken a snow globe and swapped the snow for LEDs, and for a second I understood exactly why I'd wanted something that felt good to sit in. I also knew exactly what it had cost, and not just in dollars. I turned into my complex, parked under the one flickering streetlight that always makes my windshield look like it's snowing dust, and sat there for a minute, hands on the wheel, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Then I went upstairs and made myself pasta, and ate it at my kitchen table at midnight in a quiet apartment. It was fine. It hurt. It was both. I don't know what my life looks like 6 months from now. I know tomorrow I'm getting up, going to work, paying for a new tire I didn't plan on, and not texting someone I got used to texting every morning. I know she's going to accept a spot at State and sign loans without my name on them, because she's stubborn in the same way I am. And I know we weren't building the same thing at the same pace, and maybe that's all this ever was. Update 3. I got off a brutal 12 at 11:40 p.m. The kind where your scrubs feel like they've absorbed every smell on the floor, chlorhexidine, microwave soup, that faint metallic tang you stop noticing until you leave. Night had the hospital lot looking like a shimmering chessboard under those high sodium lights that make everything feel a half second off. I did the thing I always do, thumbed the fob in my pocket just to hear the little metallic cricket chirp the Audi makes, like a promise waiting for me. I glanced up to see the blink. Nothing blinked. I walk to where I always park, row C, third light pole, crack in the asphalt that looks like Florida. There was a dark rectangle of empty between a beige Corolla and a Tacoma with a sun-faded fishing sticker. My brain did that weird human thing where it insisted I was wrong about geography. I paced once. Twice. I crouched to look under cars like it was hiding. It took a full 30 seconds before the word formed cleanly in my head. Stolen. I unlocked my phone and opened the Audi app. Vehicle offline. A little spinning wheel acting like it was trying to reach a friend who moved away without telling anyone. I stood there in the heat, neck prickly, palm numb around the fob like if I squeezed hard enough the car would materialize. I called security, then the police. Both asked if I was sure I hadn't parked somewhere else, like this was a logic puzzle and I just needed to slide the right tile. An officer took my statement leaning against his cruiser, pen scratching, eyes flicking up like I might give him a twist. Keyless entry? He asked. I nodded. He explained relay theft in the voice you use when you're explaining to toddlers why the sky is blue. They boost the signal from your fob. These German cars are popular. He almost apologized to the badge on his own chest for the predictability. He told me I'd get a case number. I already had it in my text messages before he finished saying it. I stood there with my empty key in my hand and did something stupid. I tapped George's name. It rang once. I hung up, heartbeat punching into my throat like I'd done something wrong. I put my phone on airplane mode like that would erase the call, then turned airplane mode off because I needed to call insurance, then watched her name slide onto my screen anyway. Are you okay? She asked, instant, no hello, the way you talk when your body goes cold. My car's gone, I said. My voice sounded flat to my own ears, like a recording. Gone like Toad? Gone like gone. She was quiet for a beat. I could hear the hum of her parents' fridge in the background, the faint TV laugh track. Do you want me to stay on the phone? She asked. That's simple. So I sat down on the curb with my knees in my hands like a kid and told her about the stupid Florida crack-in, the asphalt that had tricked me into thinking I'd lost my mind. She told me she'd been studying receptor pharmacodynamics and kept mixing up affinity and efficacy, which felt on the nose. We talked while I did all the grown-up tasks, filed the claim, called a ride, tried to memorize the way the lot looked without the Audi so I'd know when it looked like itself again. When I got into the back of a rideshare that smelled aggressively like cinnamon, she said, text me when you get home. Like we were still us and she had a right to know the bookend of my day. I did. She sent back a blue heart and then, I'm sorry, and I stared at those two things together for a long time. The next morning was an assembly line of adult responsibilities. I sat in my manager's office with my shoes unlaced and explained why I was going to be late. She slid a bowl of Werther's across her desk like that was the appropriate candy for car theft. I learned more about comprehensive coverage than I ever wanted to. I learned that my rental coverage existed and meant the guy at Enterprise would look at my badge and go, rough night? I drove away in a Kia Soul that felt like moving into a dorm room after you've been living in an apartment with crown molding. It wasn't bad. It wasn't the Audi. My wrists learned the difference between precise steering and we do our best. 2 days later, I was pulling 4 tubing out of a cupboard when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize and a voice told me they'd found my vehicle. Where? I asked, adrenaline lighting like brush fire. We'll text the location, they said, like they were dropping a pin to a picnic spot. The pin was an impound lot on the edge of town that lives behind a chain-link fence topped with lazy barbed wire that looked like a doodle drawn by someone distracted. A guy with a sun tattoo on his forearm led me through a maze of cars that looked like stories that had ended mid-sentence. When he stopped, it was almost cruel. The Audi sat on blocks, wheels gone, grille ripped, the 4 rings pried out like teeth. The back window was spiderwebbed where someone had gotten impatient. The interior had been flayed, plastic shavings on the mat, glove box hanging its tongue out. One of the TPS sensors dangled like a little earring. The smell inside was sharp, cheap cologne and cigarette and a ghost of the nicer one I used that morning we broke up. I touched the place where the rings should have been and my finger came away gray. It looked naked, indecent. Stripped quick, the guy said, not unkind. These crews, man. We got 3 Audis this week. I stood there and felt the stupidest tears sting, as if the car itself had feelings I hadn't considered when I made it into a symbol. I took a photo without thinking and before I could stop myself, sent it to Georgia. She replied fast, I'm sorry. That looks wrong. Then, a second later, no rings. I stared at those words until their literal meaning and their metaphor twisted together like the barbed wire overhead. Insurance totaled it. Numbers, math, blah blah. My down payment softened the blow. The loan didn't eat me alive. I turned in the key fob to a guy in a polo at the credit union and it felt like handing back a talisman that had stopped working. Enterprise kept extending my rental like it was a game of pretend where I was a person with a car. I kept catching myself looking at other cars in traffic the way you keep looking for your ex in crowds the first week after a breakup. I told myself I'd look into a bolt lock for a steering wheel next time, a Faraday pouch for a fob. It was funny, I thought buying the Audi had been the impulsive act in a life of planning, but this, losing it in a way that stripped it right down to its core, pulled something quiet loose in me I didn't know I'd been holding that tightly. That Saturday, With nothing particular to do and the Kia's radio preset stuck on classic rock, I drove to the state park where I'd set my lock screen. The trailhead lot was half full. Families unloading coolers. A couple with matching trekking poles, a guy in a neon tank top doing aggressive hamstring stretches. I hiked until the noise of the road fell away. I sat on a warm rock and watched a dragonfly claim the same little airspace over and over like it was being paid for that square footage. When I got back to the car, I had a text from Georgia waiting, a selfie in a white coat with her hair jammed up in a way that said she'd done it at a red light. "We had the ceremony," she wrote. "I thought you'd want to see." Her smile was huge, eyes red. In the background, her mom held a bouquet like she was handling evidence. I stared at her name on my screen, at the Kansas sky blue of the coat lapels, at the way small things announce big things when you're ready to hear them. I typed, "I'm proud of you." My sausage fingers wanted to add still, always, even now, but I didn't. She wrote back, "I know," and then, "Are you going to get another Audi?" I surprised myself when I laughed out loud alone in the car. I wrote, "No rings is bad luck, remember?" And she sent back a crying laugh emoji and then a ring emoji, then kidding, and for 10 seconds it felt like we were both living inside the same joke again. The next week, my manager called me into that same office with the Werthers. "Preceptor track still yours if you want it," she said, and slid the paper toward me like a card you know your opponent can't trump. "You sure you're up for it right now?" I looked at the pictures of her grandchildren on the filing cabinet, at the little ceramic plant that's been dead for a year and nobody will admit it because of the office aesthetic. "Yeah," I said. "I'm up for it." It felt like choosing something that wasn't about wanting the trappings of adulthood but about doing the work of it. On my lunch break, I walked down the street to the used lot with a giant wacky inflatable arm guy half deflated, shoulders shrugging with the wind like he couldn't decide if he cared. There was a 2017 Accord with cloth seats and Apple CarPlay and no keyless nonsense. The sales guy talked me through service records. He didn't say German engineering once. I put my hand on the roof and didn't get the little thrill I'd felt with the A6. I also didn't feel a panic rise in my throat about waking up to an empty rectangle of asphalt. On my way back to the hospital, I stopped at Walgreens for deodorant and a protein bar, and ended up behind George's dad at the pharmacy window. He didn't see me. Or if he did, he pretended not to. He was talking to a woman about an insurance override, nodding when she set her jaw and said she'd sue the whole state if they didn't fill her meds. He had that set jaw trying to be casual look from Burger Night. For a second, I watched him, then left without the protein bar. In the parking lot, I sat in the Kia and thought about how there were 100 different versions of last month that could have ended in 100 different ways and we'd still all be standing in this lot doing regular things like buying deodorant. It felt both comforting and like a dare. That night, I sent a last text. Not the dramatic kind you send to reopen a thing you've already closed. Just, be good. Don't forget to eat on lab days. She wrote back, "You too, bring snacks on your precept days so the babies don't pass out." Babies. She meant the new grads. The text bubble sat there blinking like it was going to say something else, then blinked out. I signed for the Accord the following Tuesday. The steering wheel felt boring in the best way. On the drive home, the sky did that thing it does in summer where it turns every shade of pink you'd accuse a painter of if they put it on canvas. A kid on a scooter pointed at my car and didn't say anything. I checked my mirrors out of reflex and watched the road behind me get swallowed by dusk. When I pulled into my spot, I caught myself reaching in my pocket for the fob to hear a chirp I wasn't going to hear. I still smiled walking upstairs. My apartment smelled like laundry and my neighbor's curry and something I couldn't identify that I decided was starting over. I put my keys in the bowl. I sat down at the table with a bowl of cereal at 9 p.m. and charted an admission in my head just because sometimes you need an easy decision after a day full of hard ones. Is it trite to say I slept better? Maybe. I woke up once at 4 a.m. and looked out the blinds at my car just to make sure it was still there. It was. I went back to bed. In the morning, my phone was quiet. No ring emojis, no police case numbers, no rental extensions. Just the weather app telling me it would be high heat and more of the same, which felt, for the first time in a while, like exactly what I wanted. Update 4. Insomnia hits weird when you think you're over a thing. It was one of those 1:17 a.m. nights where the air feels heavy like someone forgot to wring it out, and I was in bed lit by the aquarium glow of my phone, doom scrolling past potted plants and free couches with U-Haul in the caption. Marketplace is a museum of other people's questionable decisions. I don't even know what I was looking for. A blender. A bookcase. A life I didn't recognize. Then I saw it, Audi 20V spokes, set of 4. Like new. The pictures were in a garage with a stained concrete floor and a red bicycle pressed against a water heater. The wheels were clean in that way that only looks clean if you've just wiped brake dust with a rag until your knuckles go gray. In photo 3, a tiny crescent of curb rash at about 2 o'clock. The exact shape and size of the kiss I gave a parking garage pillar last fall and pretended was character. People's cars don't have identical scars by coincidence. My stomach did the drop like an elevator that misjudged the floor. I didn't message right away. I zoomed in until the pixels fuzzed. I flicked to my camera roll and found a photo from October, the one I sent to my cousin when she asked what my ridiculous new car looked like. Same tiny arc. Same missing paint fleck inside the arc that only I would notice because I'd sat there too long feeling stupid about it. I messaged the seller anyway, still available? He replied in under a minute with the kind of punctuation that says you're either 17 or not worried about consequences. Yep. Cash only. Meet off 35? QT by the off-ramp. I stared at QT by the off-ramp like it was code for something I was too tired to decode. I backed out of the chat and hit the number for the detective who gave me the impound address. I expected voicemail, a callback 3 days later. He picked up on the second ring, voice thick like I woke him but not irritated. Walk me through it, he said after a ramble dumped everything in one breath. He told me not to engage further. He told me to screenshot everything. He told me to keep my head. He texted me minutes later, we want to set the meet. You comfortable waiting at the next lot over? The phrase next lot over felt both absurd and perfectly normal for the way my life has been lately. By noon the next day, I was parked nose in at a tire shop 2 doors down from the QT, a quart idling cool air on my shins, a plainclothes guy in cargo shorts and a bait and tackle hat in the passenger seat like we were old friends catching up. A different unmarked car sat crooked a row behind us. The detective, Avila, he introduced himself like I should have known, stood outside in the heat using his phone as a mirror to fix something in his eye, then tucked into shade with a coffee he treated like an anchor. The QT had that humming, sticky energy of midday, hot dogs rotating like they were trying to hypnotize whoever would let them. A kid dragged a case of water like a sled. Somewhere in there, a Slurpee machine burbled. A silver Civic with mismatched hubcaps pulled in slow, the kind of slow that tries so hard to look casual it reads as theater. 2 guys got out, both in shirts that said Burger King in different fonts like they'd raided a thrift store and thought it was camouflage. The driver had a jawline so sharp it looked photoshopped. The passenger walked with a tiny limp like he'd memorized it. They popped the trunk before they got to the curb as if eager. 4 wheels glinted like fish laid out on ice. You could feel the unmarked car sit up. Avila raised a finger without looking at anyone and the air went tight. Everything after that telescoped. The not cops with their not cop hats turned into cops with voices that brooked no argument. The passenger took a half step like he might rabbit and then decided against making his morning worse. Trunk lining got lifted like a magic trick. An inventory of extras surfaced. 2 fobs wrapped in foil, a canvas bag of lug nuts, a square of aluminum that used to be someone's grill badge peeled like a sticker. He held it up and I felt my mouth go dry. It had 4 circles and a hairline crack running through the second ring like a vein. I felt that stupid impulse to reach out. It was mine, but I kept my hands on my thighs and pressed down so hard my fingers hurt. You good? The cargo shorts guy asked. I nodded. My throat didn't trust me. They took statements. They told me none of it was a movie, even as it felt like a small one. Paramedics rolled up for gas and watched with the casual curiosity of people who see stranger every hour. The cashier at the QT propped his chin in his hand like he'd ordered this show with his lunch. I stood in the slice of shade cast by the ice machine and talked through my identifying marks in a voice that sounded patient and medical. Backwards 7-shaped scuff, silver flake in the curve like a birthmark, time-stamped photo. Avila took it all in and didn't say I was being sentimental about circular metal. We're about to serve a unit off airline, he said like he was telling me about a PTA meeting. Doesn't mean we'll find the Holy Grail. Just means this is bigger than the 2 of them. He had a way of saying bigger that made me feel like both nothing and a useful puzzle piece. By early evening I was walking through a storage unit that smelled like hot rubber and dust, light broken into slats by the half-open door. Avila shone his phone's flashlight at walls lined with bumpers and headlights, fenders stacked like cake layers, a milk crate stuffed with emblems like a dentist's nightmare. There it was. My grill, minus its smile, the place where my front plate bracket had rubbed a shallow line, there. He looked at me, and I just pointed, nodding once like my head weighed 100 pounds. Someone photographed my finger next to the line. Someone else labeled a bag. It all went into the choreography of evidence, and I realized how long it had been since I'd watched a team do their job like a hive. Insurance called me the next day and spoke fluent subrogation, which sounds like a Futurama planet but is apparently the part where they try to get their money back. Translation: the parts were technically theirs now. Translation: no, I couldn't have my stupid rings back to turn into a keychain. After the case resolves, we can release to rightful owner, a woman said kindly, and I knew rightful owner didn't mean me anymore. Avila texted me a photo anyway, my rings in an evidence bag, the crack I could pick out of a lineup, a case number written in Sharpie. You helped, he wrote. I stared at the picture on my lunch break with deli turkey in my mouth and wanted to send it to someone. I sent it to Georgia before I could talk myself out of it. She wrote back, holy shit, which is an all-purpose prayer. Then, proud of you, and I had to sit with the fact that sometimes the person who can't walk beside you anymore still knows the right sentence. At work that week, I took on my first precept shift like I'd been waiting to get called up and didn't want to waste it. My orientee was a guy named Jonah who looks 12 in scrubs and talks like he's apologizing for taking up air. He flinched at his first 4 attempt and then got it on the second try with hands steady as old wood. You're fine, I told him, and meant it. Later, he asked me if there was a trick to not thinking about everything that can go wrong all the time. I told him no, and then showed him the note I keep in my phone with the steps for declotting a line because my brain refuses to memorize them. He laughed, grateful that the person who's supposed to know things didn't pretend to be a machine. On Friday night, a thunderstorm rolled through with that full theatricality, lightning that made the neighbors cheer like they were watching fireworks, rain that sounded like 1,000 hands drumming on my roof. I sat on the floor with my back against my couch and the sliding door cracked just enough to let the smell of petrichor in, and fiddled with a cheap knockoff Audi ring I bought on eBay for $9 because I'm sentimental and petty. It arrived too shiny, too light, the chrome finish already threatening to peel at the edges. I hung it on a nail by the door where my keys live like a dare to myself to not make it a symbol. I failed. It's a reminder instead. Pick something for yourself, live with the cost, learn the scam, keep the receipt. 2 days later, the gas station attached to our hospital did its own tiny bit of fady nonsense. I went in for a Gatorade and came out, into the same patch of heat and ambulance idle as the sting day. A medic I'd seen in passing slid down out of the rig and said, "You're the guy with the stolen Audi," not a question, said with a grin that made the words feel more like a badge than a bruise. Her name is Lena. She has a clean braid and forearms that say she lifts patients and kettlebells. We stood there talking too long about will locks and Faraday pouches, which would have been absurd if half our job wasn't sharing product recommendations for things that keep people alive. She asked about the Accord and I said, "She's boring," and Lena said, "Boring's a flex," like it was wisdom she'd been waiting to drop on the right person. She gave me her number the way paramedics do, fast, practical, a resource. "For if you want the info on that comp steering lock," she said, and didn't pretend it was only for that. Sunday, Georgia texted me a photo of her pharmacy badge clipped to her white coat collar, the lamination catching light. "Started shadowing in the 4th room today," she wrote. No ring emojis, no subtext. Just a fact from a life running parallel to mine. I told her to double glove and label clearly like the most boring man alive. She hit me with a lol that read as fond, and then, "Be safe," which somehow filled the space between us in a way that felt appropriate and unheavy. This morning I woke up before my alarm to a quiet I didn't register as unusual until I realized the usual electric nervousness I'd been training myself to ignore had dialed down a few clicks. I made coffee and watched the Accord sit exactly where I left it, the tiny water beads holding on from last night's storm like stubbornness. On the walk to the lot, I felt the tug to reach for a fob chirp that doesn't exist anymore and didn't reach. On my way in, Avila called to tell me they'd hit 2 more units and scooped 3 more cars worth of rings out of a crate. "Your guys rolled on their supplier," he said, and there was a little satisfaction in his voice like a mechanic popping a seized bolt. "If anyone asks, don't buy car parts from a guy in a Burger King shirt." I told him I'd try to spread that public health message. He laughed and hung up. I passed Walgreens on my commute and the sign out front said "Flu shots back in stock" in sun-faded letters. George's dad was at the counter, head down over a stack of scripts, jaw not pretending anything. We didn't wave. It didn't feel like enemies. It felt like 2 people clocked in. I parked under the same flickering light at the hospital out of habit and watched it blink on off on over my hood. Boring. Reliable. A little ugly if you catch it at the wrong angle. The kind of thing you build around. I went inside and started my day.